What up, world? Waxvillain, Seattle, Washington. You already know what it is. Welcome to Waxvillain Fireside Chat. Tonight is special, y'all. We got Waxvillain family in the house. My brother, Chris Lujan, and he's here to talk about new music with New Tone recordings. Keep it locked. We'll kick things off real soon. New Tone's a label, baby. Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to everybody on the line. We see it. Yeah. I'm too hyped. I'm too hyped for an interview. I've been listening to this for the last 10 minutes.
Right on, man. We've been chatting, haven't we?
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really hyped right now. Give me 1 second. I got to turn this down. I can hear it in the headphones.
I run into that same problem all the time. Yo, exactly.
Is that how it's pronounced?
Yo.
That's how it's pronounced?
Yes.
Ooh, I was about to botch it. Man.
What were you going to say? Yo?
I was going to wait for you to somehow say it, and then I was going to piggyback off it later on.
Sure.
You in the lab I can see?
Yep, absolutely.
How's the weather out there today?
High 70s. How about you?
It's a little cool. You know how Seattle is.
Yeah. I drove down to LA on Saturday and it rained the whole way.
Oof. Was the traffic bad?
Not at all. No.
All right.
Easy, quick in and out.
All right. Well, if you're ready, man, I'll go ahead and kick things off.
Let's go.
I want to welcome everybody to Waxvillain Fireside Chat. Fireside Chats are similar to interviews. However, we take the time to do the research. We want to make sure that we support and strengthen what's already out there and we're not duplicating things. Tonight is real special, y'all. Chris Lujan is Waxvillain family. You've seen him on many times on a Waxvillain Fireside Chat, but tonight is different. He's repping New Tone recordings, as I mentioned earlier when I showed you the sweatshirt. I'm super excited for tonight because I'll tell you what, I have been connecting with Chris Lujan since 2021. And what drew me to his music first was the sound of the production. That was something that I really loved. And from Andre Cruz and Chris Lujan to then discovering his previous work with MTET, this has just been a beautiful journey and evolution, especially from the lens of a fan, seeing Chris's evolution over time. Tonight, we're going to talk about new music. He's got some great stuff coming out on New Tone recordings. We talked about the Biily Eilish, single that was released today. He's got a 45 on the way. And I've heard even more music under the moniker Life of Grime. We're going to get into things. Chris, thank you so much for being here, brother. I'm always happy to talk with you. I always say that when we do a live stream, it's kind of funny because we usually talk so much and it just feels so natural and normal.
Yeah, but we have to be careful because people are listening.
I know, right? We got an audience. Here's the thing, man. One of the things that I think about as I was preparing for this interview is when I think about a lot of artists' body of work, the first record is usually the strongest. It's the one that captures us. And as we hear album after album, it typically goes in the same line, right? It's a straight shoot. I want to ask you, what keeps you creating? What is it that moves you to create and evolve your sound?
It's just something I have to do. As far as it, I mean, I've been doing it so long, it's like my favorite thing to do, to be, as you said, in the lab, just recording, producing, engineer, like the whole thing, the whole package of not just writing the music, but the recording of it as well. I guess what keeps me doing it is just stuff comes into my head and I got to get it out, hence this new sound. It kind of happened by accident almost.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned something that I want to go back to. You talked about the recording aspect of it. And I think a lot of us as fans, we get the final product and we're not kind of lifting up the hood to see what's really under there. Can you talk about how important that is, the recording aspect?
Sure. This is one thing you're going to have to get used to, is me letting my dog in and out of this place. If you've ever watched me go live doing a session, this dog in and out. So apologies.
Son, I've had so many meetings with you on a live stream where the dog is barking and all that stuff. So no problem.
I've been doing it. I've been recording since my early 20s. and I'll be 50 this year, if that gives you any idea of what's going on. Um, Me and my friend, his name's Ben McAllister. He goes by Benny Mac. And he was like a true hip hop guy. And back then we started a little studio / production company called Soul Kitchen Productions. And we were just buying buying microphones, buying mixers, and everything at that point was just like, I was playing guitar but we were looping stuff, and we were trying to like go down this hip hop road. It kind of didn't pan out, but I was always buying my own recording gear, because it was either I go spend thousands of dollars in the studio, or I spend $1,000 on recording gear, learn how to use it, then I have the recording gear forever.
Yeah.
So that was the route I took. In this 30-year journey, I've only actually been in, less than a half dozen like actual studios. I've just done everything myself for the most part.
Okay. Any challenges along the way that you had to navigate?
Yeah, there was a time in the early 2000s when there was nobody doing the music I wanted to do, or so I thought. I was playing a lot of jazz gigs at restaurants, playing jazz standards on the upright bass, and I wanted to be playing soul and funk, and there was nobody doing it at that time out here, so I kind of put it away. I kind of was like, I'm just gonna not play music for a while. And at that time I had a 1965 Ludwig Club Date drum kit. I had a Fender Rhodes back then, and I kind of just started selling stuff because I was like, I'm not using this, and I probably went for 3 years where I didn't play an instrument at all. And so until I found out, like, oh, and this is around the time when the Dap Kings and Mighty Imperials and all of that stuff started happening. And I got wind of that, and I was like, oh, there are people here doing this stuff. It is happening still. And I tried to start putting bands together then. So that was quite the challenge of, not just thinking there's nobody doing this. I didn't say I quit, but, essentially I kind of put everything down for a few years and then picked it back up.
I love that. I love that. Now, last year you shared a collection of songs with me that really stood apart from your work with Andre Cruz. And I'm also at the same time saying that you're one of the hardest working men on the scene. I think about everything that you've done, from joining Industry Music Group to releasing the follow-up album, the production, and now you're with New Tone Recordings. How did all this come about?
Well, let's go back to the songs, I guess. I sent you a batch of songs. So that's when I say that it kind of happened by accident. I had a studio space out in Berkeley, and, I would go there every Friday and just record, and I started recording some instrumental stuff, some new instrumental stuff. And, you heard one of them is Leave the Gun, Take the Tacos. That kind of was the beginning of trying to explore something new. But then after that, I kind of accidentally recorded something that was very like had a hip hop vibe to it. Leave the Gun, Take the Tacos isn't very hip hop. It's kind of spaghetti western, Italian horror movie soundtrack. But I kind of accidentally fumbled upon this hip hop sound, instrumental still, all real instruments, no loops, no MPCs. And I loved it. And, there's a guy, Mike Walty, who runs the studio there. He would come in and just like freak out and be like, oh my God, this is so good. And so I just kept exploring that and had a few songs, and I was like, oh, this is a thing, And then there was a moment when it was like, okay, I'm going to put together an album around this. And, I'm still working on that album, still recording. I got 3 songs that I'm working on today. I'm really like focusing it in on that like instrumental boom bap, golden era 90s hip hop sound. And then New Tone came into the picture, thanks to you, Mr. Waxvillain. I think you had, behind the scenes been talking to them about me, and then we started talking, and I sent them some tracks, and then I spoke with Vincent over there at New Tone, and the ball got rolling, and you know, we signed up for an album, and the first single is coming out real soon.
Man, that's a beautiful story. Let's go back a little bit. As this, you know, by accident kind of thing happened, talk to me about like the inspiration and what kept you going with it. Because when I think about instrumental music, clearly there's no lyrics to it. And so, what were you envisioning in your head? I mean, when I think of like '90s boom bap, I grew up on the East Coast, upstate New York. You know, we didn't have Apple Music. Streaming wasn't a thing, right? It was you come home from school, you put on Rhapsody in the basement, you know, you get the visual of
Yeah.
what's going on, and then of course, you know, mom is taking me to Media Play to get the CDs and everything, and I'm on my way to school. I think I told you there was when I had seen like Snoop Dogg for the very first time, right, in the album. I went out and I got a pea coat. I was like, Mom, you got to get me a pea coat for Christmas because I saw Snoop wear one in the video. So those are the kind of the things that come to mind when I think of like not necessarily boom bap sound, but back then. And I want to know for you as you're creating, as this goes from accident to you know a fully formed idea, what is it that's going through your mind? What are you envisioning with the sounds, and what is it that you want listeners to kind of take away from this?
Right. Well, I guess the accident part was me not focusing on a certain thing, right? The accident part was me kind of creating and kind of stumbling upon it and then realizing that it had that sound, right? So then once I realized, oh, this has that sound, then I went all in on like, okay, I'm going to try to write all of this stuff from like a 90s perspective, basically. You know, I'm going to go in on that 90s sound of hip hop. It was once I realized that, it was like, okay, I can focus this more instead of just writing an instrumental every now and then, which is kind of the how it happened by accident. Is, you know, there were a few songs that kind of fit together once I realized, oh, this is where it's headed, you know. So I guess I want, you know, people to feel that vibe that they had in the 90s. So I'm probably writing this stuff for our generation, you know. So and maybe the new generation, since De La Soul's whole catalog is now available, you know, maybe the younger generation has checked it out and is into it. But once I, you know, in the 90s, that's when I really was listening to a lot of hip hop, from Mos Def, Talib Kweli, Jurassic 5, Cypress Hill, De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest, all of that stuff. So I am kind of like, okay, let me write like that. Except for, again, I'm not using drum machines. I'm not using samples. You know, it's all live instruments.
Live instrumentation, you know, that's important to know. You know, talk to us about the aesthetics of it though. How are you keeping it true to that boom bap sound as you're recreating?
Yeah, that's a
Because think about it like this, right? When I think of like Rare Soul, and then I think about the modern scene, and even now when new music that's soulful is created, it doesn't capture the essence of what we hear when we play like the realistics and records like that. You know, I think about the drums, I think about the horns. And when I think about boom bap, there's a certain texture that you get when you're listening to a DJ Premier, a De La
yeah.
Soul, the list
Yeah.
goes on. So how does Chris Lujan take the past and bring it forward?
Well, you know, Michael Reed is the best drummer out here in the Bay Area for sure, and he is way into the hip hop stuff. So he's the drummer on almost all of this stuff. I would
Shout out
say
to
10
Michael
out of
Reed.
12 songs. Yeah, you know
Yeah.
Mike. And he's been recording at his house, and he really has his tones and that stuff down. So he'll send me some drums, and I'll put them on the Tascam, which is right here,
Yeah.
and then start adding stuff. So I just, and again, I'm not like copying in a way like, oh, I'm going to recreate. You know, there's a song called, or a band called, I don't know if they're called OMA or if they're just OMA, and
Yeah.
they do a lot of like hip hop covers as a live
Yeah.
band. They'll play, and so you know what I'm talking about.
I
And
know the
so
group.
I'm
Yeah.
not, yeah. So I'm not covering songs like that, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with what they're doing. They're quite popular and they're awesome, but I'm writing original music that has that, you know, 90s sound. I think I've just listened to so much of it. I
Yeah.
know what to do. It's weird because like a lot of, I was thinking about this. that I'm very happy with what I've been turning out lately. Gotta let the dog in. I'm very happy with what I've been turning out lately.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it, you know, and all of that 90s stuff, the stuff we're talking about, like Tribe Called Quest or De La Soul, they all sampled old 60s soul records,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So it, you know, it was a few weeks ago, it's like, oh, I'm creating all of these new 60s sounding soul guitar parts. That's what I'm doing with Andre anyways, you know? That's that whole like 60s soul thing. So like once I was like, oh, I'm kind of just continuing this into this, you know, because like I said, it's just like that 90s hip hop sampled all the 60s stuff. I do the 60s style stuff with Andre. And it's like, oh, I'm just kind of bringing that to this. I didn't even realize that. Like, it didn't cross my mind that, oh, they were sampling 60s stuff until like last week. So, you know, I guess I'm just trying to write like how I hear it, you know?
I love that. I think the ear is important. I always think back to when Aaron Frazier was on, and I was asking him a question around the drums on Bring You a Ring. And I said, it sounds more like this than that. And he was like, man, he's like audio forensics. He's like, the last thing I did, I sent it to Terry, he put it through the Tascam, and that's exactly what they had done for, I'm drawing a blank, but the Okonski record. And
Yeah.
so I think that ability to hear that sound, it's very comforting when you're like, this is familiar, I know this. This feels right.
Right. So that's what I'm trying to do is write that, you know, write new stuff that has that familiar sound of 90s hip hop.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned the Tascam because my Tascam was down for a couple weeks and I was like, oh man, like everything goes through this Tascam. So I actually like forced myself to record digitally, which I never do.
Yeah.
And so I recorded digitally and I just got it hooked up again this morning. And so those things that I recorded digitally, I spent this morning dumping them all onto the Tascam to give it that sound. You know?
Yeah, yeah. Man, it's funny because when I was making beats, as much as I loved gear, I hated gear because I like Trigger and everything, but to connect it all was such a problem. And when you involve a computer, it's even harder. I can't tell you how many times I had to call someone over to fix it, you know, so that the keyboard, the DAW would work with the, you know, whatever I was using. But
I've got a buffet worth of spaghetti in cables back here.
I hope
it's such a wreck.
You use zip ties?
What's that?
Do you use zip ties and cable management?
I try to use the shortest cables possible so that they're not just all over the place. But, you know,
Now,
I need to get everything inside like a tube or something. You know?
Amazon, baby.
Yeah.
I'm all about cable management. But listen. Last year you released, it was a very short release. The window was like open and then it closed 24 hours later. And that was the 45 that you put out on Macrotone. Now, I told everybody not to sleep. Some listened, some didn't. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because that record came out under the name Chris Lujan.
Yeah.
But what we're about to experience goes under a new moniker, Life of Grime.
Yes.
And so for those that have the existing record, to me, that makes it that much more special because we're not going to see that again.
Right.
At least not with this sound. But the question is, man, when it comes to Life of Grime, what inspired that name? What does it mean to you? And how does it fit into this sound?
Well, you know, I'm trying to, because this is what I call golden era hip hop, instrumental, golden era hip hop inspired boom bap, right? I'm trying to reach a different audience with it. You know, that's the goal, is to get it into the hip hop fans' hands, you know, or even MCs. Again, see, this is perfect because this is instrumental. If an MC wants it, it's kind of designed for that, you know. I didn't write them in arrangements for an MC, so an MC could take it, chop it up, and then use it. Yeah. So that's kind of the goal. So my goal is to get it into the hands of those who might do that, right? So, you know, I have this vast catalog of Chris Lujan stuff, you know, from, you know, back when I did Don't Go Acting a Fool to all of the stuff with Andre. Again, I just released the Biily Eilish cover today under my own name. So I wanted to differentiate it because I didn't want it to get confused with a soul sound. Do you know what I mean? I wanted to like draw a line and go, this is for a different audience. You know, I think a lot of our fans and friends will still like it because it's very soulful and funky. But the goal with it was to get it into different hands, hence the different name. So once I thought about, okay, I need to give this a name. Musicians have notes in their phones with 1,000 song titles, right? So I just was like, I need to give this a name. Let me go to my notes. You know, I have a bunch of song titles in there. I have a few album titles in there. I have different band names in there, just in case something gets started later on. I could remember like, oh yeah, I had this really good idea for this name. And Life of Grime was one of those names for an album. And I was like, oh, that sounds, I like that, you know, as a name of a group. So here I am like putting on like, you know, 90s hip hop hat and going, okay, what sounds like a hip hop band from back then? And I had Life of Grime in the notes, and it seemed to fit the aesthetic of the, you know, using tape, using live instruments, and, you know, it's dirty, you know. So that was kind of why I landed on that name.
Well, what I like about it is, you know, in addition to the idea of grime, it's not like, you know, your traditional name where it's going to be like Lil something or like
Yeah.
Wu-Tang Clan. To me, it very much sounds like something East Coast underground. And that name, in addition to the sound, is so far from what you've put out in the
Yeah.
past. So not only is the sound different, the name is different, and like, you know, it doesn't really feel like a Chris Lujan thing to a degree. So I really like that because I think you got one shot to make a first impression when it comes to that. And so when people were seeing those first couple posts, Life of Grime, they're like, what is that?
Yeah.
Who is it? We didn't know. We didn't know whether it was one person, whether it was a few. And so I really like that name and how it fits kind of like a movement, if you will. Now, Yo and Black Coffee, those are the instrumentals that are coming out on the first single. Give us a description of those, but I want you to take us through the creative process. I'm always trying to glean and pull out what we don't get to see.
Sure.
We see the 45, we see, you know, the notes below in the post, but nobody knows what goes on, you know, in the studio. So talk us through that process.
So these were both recorded at the Berkeley space that is known as Black Diamond HQ when I'm there. And Yo, I think, was the third song I recorded that was specifically for this project. And this one so now again, we're going back to Michael Reed. So Michael Reed, always recording breaks. So he had sent me a folder of 10 what he calls Wu-Tang breaks, right? So it's basically like 10 Wu-Tang drum beats that he has replayed, right? So for that one, I took one of those breaks and looped it, right? So I guess there is some looping as far as like the drums go, but no sampling or anything like that. So I looped his drums, and I always had I never wanted to record with a drum loop because I thought now the drummer cannot react to me. I can't write an arrangement and have the drums follow me. Oh, now we're going to the B section. Give me a fill. Or now the drums play this beat. You know, that can't happen now because I'm playing to a loop. And I for a long time, I didn't want to do that. And then I was like, you know what? There's a lot of records that are that. Tommy Guerrero's first record. There's some Connie Price and the Keystones, you know, stuff that's like that I didn't know was that until I was told that, you know. I'm just listening to all of the instruments on top of it, not realizing it's a drum loop until they told me. You know, Tommy Guerrero was in that space in Berkeley, and I loved that album, and I talked to him about it, and he told me those are all loops. I didn't even know it, and I've been listening to that album for like 25 years.
Those are good records that he put out.
Yeah. So Yo started like that, you know. So once I'm like, okay, I can do this, you know. And so, yo, I think I had an organ part for it. No, I didn't. Mike played the organ part. What did I have? I think I just like looped his drums and then just started playing bass. I remember with that one, I like was playing bass and I was playing a bass line and I was like, in my mind, it was like, okay, this is the bass line. And then I was like, I hate it. And I like went and I got coffee across the street, came back, rewrote a whole nother bass line, fell in love with it. I added some guitar stuff to it. And then this is one where me and Mike collaborated fully. I sent it to him and said, now, why don't you add some stuff to this now? Instead of just using his drums, why don't you add? So he added, I believe there's vibraphone on there, and there's definitely the organ. He came to the studio to lay down that organ. And that was one of those ones where Mike Walty came in, you know, the guy who had the studio, and is just like, Jesus Christ, this is so bad, you know, so like, so nasty, you know, so, and that's always nice, you know, to hear. So, you know, that was Yo, you know, and I, you know, recorded that one. And then with Black Coffee, which is the
Hold
B-side.
on.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about the title a bit, because, you know, I think you hear a sound, you feel something from it, but the song name is important because we don't get lyrics to go with it. So talk to us about the name of the song.
Okay, well, you got Yo. Sounds like Yo, Y-O, right?
Yeah.
Just Yo. Well, I think the Oscars from 2 years ago had just happened, right? And Everything Everywhere All at Once, I believe that's what the movie's called. Michelle Yeoh won for Actress of the Year or whatever.
Yeah.
And so like I had just written that song, it needed a title, and I was like, Yo, you know. So like we could attribute it to her, dedicated to Michelle Yeoh, you know.
I love that.
So song titles could be, you know, since they're instrumental, you know, it is kind of like you could name it whatever, but obviously like I do listen and go, okay, what embodies this, you know? Black Coffee?
Let's do it.
Okay, so Black Coffee, I wrote that one on the Fender Rhodes, which I'm not much of a keys player. So when I play the keys, it really lets me kind of try to play what's in my head instead of having a guitar in my hands or a bass in my hands and knowing where my fingers go. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like I have patterns that I play. So, and not on purpose. It's just, I think everybody does it. So since I'm not really a keyboard player, and I'm doing this because I got the Hammond organ right there and the Fender Rhodes right there, but I'm not really a keyboard player. So I have to figure out what's in my head instead of playing standard patterns that I'm used to. So I came up with Black Coffee all on the Rhodes, the whole arrangement, and I had Mike come out. So that one is live drums with me, and so Mike came out to the studio, played drums. I was behind the glass in the control room, and we carried the Fender Rhodes into the control room because the Rhodes is the only part that I had for the song so far. So he recorded the drums behind the glass, and I'm in the control room playing the Rhodes at the same time, right? He leaves, I add everything else. I add the bass, there's acoustic piano on there, there is Hammond organ, there's some guitar. So that one, other than the drums, I played all myself, which you'll find out is like a lot of this project. And I loved it. And I guess the inspiration from that one, the inspiration for Yo was just like, I don't know what it was. I was just writing, you know. But the inspiration for Black Coffee is I was listening to a lot of the instrumental Holy Hive stuff.
Yeah.
And like the Shacks and stuff like that. Okay. So, you know, and then like Homer Steinweiss plays drums on all that stuff. So I was kind of trying to go for that like mellow vibe. It's funny, when I had it mastered, I brought it to, his name's Griffin Brashears. He lives in San Luis Obispo. And I was playing him the tracks, and it's kind of a sweet song, you know. It's not heavy, hard hitting drum. It's not like super boom bap, but I played it for them, and they described it as a hip hop lullaby. And so I was like, well, that's perfect, because that's what we're going for here, you know.
Man,
so
I remember when we talked about Black Coffee at night, and you know, it's funny that you mention. Because when you said his name, what is it, Homer Steinweiss? I thought about the Olympians record.
Sure.
And now I can kind of connect Black Coffee to that a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about these two songs. We're going to get to the real nitty-gritty details about this release. But something stood out to me, and you talked about when you're playing the keys and not really knowing patterns. It reminded me of when I first started making beats. I didn't know anything, right? And so many of us, we started out with Fruity Loops, FL Studio. And I always kind of reflect on how much fun I had when I didn't understand the framework, the rules. Because when you start to know the rules and there's a process around things, I felt like constricted. And I'm like, well, I can't do that now. So I love that you kind of opened up about that creativity and just kind of, you knew it was in your head and you needed to get it out. And I think sometimes when you know the instrument, you know the programming too well, it restricts you from that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a baby songwriter, I was using Acid. Do you remember Acid, that program?
Bro, I think I tried everything. I love software and gear.
Yeah, I used to use that for drum loops back when I was like in my, early 20s, just trying to write music and stuff like that,
Now, we talked about these two songs. You told us about the titles, but really, these are just two of the body of work under Life of Grime. We're going to play these in a little bit. We're going to give everybody a sample. But what do you want people to take away from these two stories? I look at music as stories, as moments, things that we make memories to. Give us a glimpse into what we should be vibing to when we hear these.
I mean, again, I think I'm writing this for our generation because they've lived through the 90s and, the golden era, as they call it.
But not everybody that is shopping vinyl and is a fan of you was thriving back then at like 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So it's important that you give us that vision.
Well, let's see. It's funny, like, as I was talking to Vincent at New Tone, I was like, it's all about fat laces and dookie gold chains, Yeah. So, like, I guess just that, like, fun party vibe of 90s hip hop for our generation. Sorry, I have to say that. Like, I want them to, like, have that feeling of, oh, I remember when this Tribe Called Quest album came out. This kind of sounds like that. Yeah, I just want people that it's definitely fun music, Yeah. I guess it's party music, kinda,
I dig that. So listen, I just want to take some time real quick. The vinyl is available for pre-order right now, correct?
Right now, yep. As of like 30 minutes ago.
As of 30 minutes ago, New Tone Recording. So for whoever's watching this, when you stream this later on, go to New Tone Recordings, hit the pre-order button, and add these. We've got Yo Digital available on April 30th, Black Coffee digital release on the 14th, and the physical product releases on the 17th. That's exciting stuff, man, to see this come into reality like this.
Yeah.
Can you give us a taste?
Absolutely. So okay, we're going vinyl right now, right?
I'll take whatever.
All right.
You got.
Test pressing.
Ooh, testes.
Life of Grime. Did you just say testes?
Not like that, man. Not like that. Keep it clean.
So this is Yo. And I could turn it down so we could talk over it if we need to. Volume okay?
Yeah.
grimy. Very happy with this.
Yeah. I hear MF Doom rapping over this, man.
So that's Yo.
Yo. Wow.
So Mike Reed drums, Mike Reed Hammond organ, Mike Reed with the reverb tank hits, and Mike Reed wrote the guitar part, but I played it. So this was like a full collaboration. So his name's on the record. If you look at the A side, it says, you know, written by Lujan and Reed.
Oh my God.
You know?
Oh my God. I gotta show people this. Listen, folks, we have a random color variant, okay? Now I gotta do a little bit more, okay? New Tone, in my opinion, has been dropping some of the coldest, sweetest, candy-coated color variants that we have seen consistently. So I showed you the picture of what one of the random color variants were like, but they got something special. It's dubbed the Black Coffee variant, and I want to show this because it actually looks like coffee.
Yep.
You know what that means, right?
Uh-oh, what's that mean?
You got to get doubles.
You have to.
Get doubles.
You have to.
Man.
Let me just shout out, since we're talking about New Tone, I mean, I love all of the artists, the McCharmleys, Los Baby Jaguars, the Jastronauts, but I have to say that the Charities record that came out earlier this year just knocked my socks off. So good.
You mean this bad boy right here?
That one. I could go get mine too, but, you know. Bring Your Love. So good.
One of the best releases we're gonna see this year. I'll tell you that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm super happy to be joining the crew, you know.
Fantastic label. Fantastic label. One of my favorites on the scene for sure. So we talked about the inspiration behind it. We talked about the creative process, the key players involved. People know the dates. Everybody's excited over the candy-coated color variants. You got to play the other one, though.
So you're ready for Black Coffee?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. You don't know how carefully I'm trying to pick up this needle so it doesn't scratch for you guys. Black Coffee.
This is a move.
I'm going to have to let this play through to my favorite part.
No problems with that, man. Man.
That's my favorite part, when it breaks down and the acoustic piano comes in.
No,
I love it.
super sick. And I mean, you got to do that when it comes to I think instrumental music. Otherwise, it's just a long, repetitive loop, and that's something that sets these instrumentals apart from others. Is that there's just a lot of like long loops. The devil is in the details, as they say, and so I have an appreciation for instrumentals that I can listen through like that, knowing that my favorite part is coming up, and so on like that.
Yeah.
One of the things we talked about, I think it was last night, and I've said this to you before, many artists have come on here, right? If you're Daptone, you got Gabe. If you're Coalmine, you got Terry. Give me a lens into the production of Chris Lujan, and talk about how this is different than the production for Andre and Chris, for M10. Talk to us about the equipment and all that.
Sure. Well, like I said, back, when I first started recording, I could either spend money going into a studio, or I could just start buying equipment and learn how to use it, So I chose the buy equipment and learn how to use it path.
But it's more about, I'm talking about the confidence. How do you get to that level, Chris, where you don't have anybody to look over the shoulder and say, what do you think? Well, it's you.
Well, right. Well, I mean, it has always been that, because I've just bought my own equipment and had to learn how to use it, and it's always been just me, But I've been doing it for years. Once I started recording the M10, things got a little more serious. Once I got but see, even recording the M10, I was the de facto producer. That, I was just like, we're all here. I'm just calling myself the producer because I'm the one recording it. I'm mixing it, whatever. And it wasn't until I got this, the Tascam 388, that like things got serious. I was like, oh, now we're really recording, and we're trying to like get a vibe. And then, shortly after that, I started investing in preamps and compressors, and so like all of that stuff is like right here,
What was
I started
R2D2? What is all that?
Well, this is it. This is the interface. This is what gets you from the computer to the tape machine, or from the tape machine to the computer. There's a little preamp right here. It's another preamp. This is a preamp compressor. I run my bass through this one all the time. Right from this into the tape, it's the sound. You got compressor. This is a reverb unit, spring reverb. There's 2 spring reverbs in here, and then just like patch bays and stuff. This is another preamp. There's a headphone amplifier. So I started investing in that kind of stuff, because before then I was just plugging microphones right into this, Now I'm running, I don't plug anything directly into this. Not that I'm opposed to it, but now I'm using outboard gear and going into it like that. But it wasn't until 2020, when everything got shut down and I was at home constantly and working on music, that I really, improved. It was basically like I put my 10,000 hours in like right then, almost, And so at that point, like I really got serious, and that's when I really started to consider myself not just a de facto producer, but like someone who's doing this seriously. And so, I mean, you want to talk about equipment, so you got that. These monitors here, these speakers, are the same speakers I bought 25 years ago. I've just been using the same speakers forever. So the tape machine, all of this stuff, you got.
Hey, Chris, real quick, I gotta chime in.
Yeah.
You called them monitors, okay, and then you said speakers. Now I know from when I was, at Guitar Center many moons ago, monitors are just different than regular speakers. Can you talk about the sound that you get from that versus what's in the car?
Well, so monitors is what they're called, but like now the average person, this is a monitor. This is a computer monitor. So like when you say monitors, people are probably thinking of screens, but in the studio world, monitors are our speakers,
Yeah.
And so studio monitors try their best. None of them are perfect,
Right.
but they try their best to have a flat response.
Yeah.
Right. So nothing is accentuated. That's the goal that they try to come to. So there's no peak in the bass. There's no peak, there's no EQ curve. That's what they're hoping for. They're hoping they're completely flat. The speakers in your car are tuned, right? Oh, we want that bass to hit, we want the highs to really sparkle. So, you could, I was going to say you could take something you do in the studio, bring it to your car, and it may sound better, but usually it's the opposite. You do something in your studio and you're dealing with that flat response, and then you bring it to your car and like, oh my God, this sounds horrible. But think about Beats headphones, right? So Beats headphones, from what I understand,
I used to know cats that would mix in those.
because they look so cool. But Beats headphones, from what I understand, are very bass heavy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you were mixing in those, so let's say you're mixing in Beats headphones and they're bass heavy. Well, you're probably going to turn down, if you're thinking that you're mixing and you want everything to sound how it should, you may have the bass too low because your headphones are turning the bass up for you.
Yep.
So what you want in studio monitors is a flat response. The flatter, the better. You don't want it to color the sound at all, because you want to really mix it how it's supposed to, sound.
Yeah.
And then you have it mastered. And like I said, for this stuff, I've been having Griffin Brashears. He mastered the Charities record. And so I've been having him master this Life of Grime stuff. And where was I going with this? He told me, like, when I was there, just looking at my EQ curve and the way he's like, oh, this looks great, and he listens. And then as he's done, I think he's mastered 8 of my tracks so far. He said, your stuff is so good, I barely have to add any compression, and when I mix this is something that I tell anyone who's mastered my stuff. I don't want it to sound any different than what I'm giving you. I just want it trimmed, the front and the back, because I'll give a little extra.
Yeah.
Just trim it, and I want it, as loud as it's supposed to be. I don't tell them not to EQ it, not to compress it, but I don't want to hear it, because then I'm like, I spent all of this time getting it to sound how I wanted.
Yeah.
I don't want it to come back to me after being mastered and sound different. And I think a lot of mix engineers kind of rely on, oh, well, once we get it mastered. And I'm just like, no, it's got to sound the way I want it to sound beforehand.
Yeah. No, man, I love that. And thank you for taking time to dive into that, because I've always said that your sound is one of the best, especially when it comes to the Andre Cruz and Chris Lujan records. Top 5 in my opinion. Probably a little higher than that. Now, in addition to what we've heard with Life of Grime, I want to dive into another layer of Chris Lujan. Let's talk about the Biily Eilish cover.
Sure.
Take it away.
What do you want to know?
Well, I mean, listen, this whole time you've really been in the trenches crafting Life of Grime.
Yeah.
And, we get to, what was I made for? And the vibe and energy is different. I felt memory-like this is something that is a mood by itself.
Oh, yeah.
That doesn't fit in Life of Grime at all.
Right.
It's very much a mood. It's something you'd make a memory to. You'd stop and think. It's cinematic. It's very peaceful. Yeah. Talk to us about what sparked you to create this kind of record and keep it true to your name, Chris Lujan.
Yeah, well, I'll start there. The reason I kept it Chris Lujan and not Life of Grime, it clearly doesn't feel like a Life of Grime track, at all. And so I had this relationship with New Tone because we're already talking about Life of Grime, right? Mm-hmm. We already have a record in production. And I recorded the Biily Eilish track, which I'll wrap around to. I recorded the Biily Eilish track and sent it to Vincent and said, you know, this, I think in my email, I said, this definitely isn't Life of Grime, but I wanted to see if you'd be interested in putting it out like under my name. And him and Magdalena listened to it, and they said it would probably be they said it would be a good way to introduce me to the label, you know, were the words. Yeah, so there we go. Chris Lujan. Yeah. So, you know, the song just like started like getting to me, you know, the Biily Eilish version. And it's just such...
You're leaving out like the best part of the story. You're leaving out the best part of the story.
What's the best part of the story?
You're sitting like on the couch with your wife.
I'm getting there.
Oh, okay.
I'm getting there.
I don't want you to leave any money on the table.
So we'll just start there then. So we're watching the Grammys, right? I'm aware of this song because, you know, it was in the Barbie soundtrack, and it's just a popular song, right?
Do you have that soundtrack?
I don't have the soundtrack, but I have the Biily Eilish 45. Once I recorded it, I was like, that's kind of what I do. If I record a song, I'm going to go buy the record. You know what I mean?
I needed to confirm whether you had the Barbie OST or not. That's all I needed to know.
I don't have the Barbie soundtrack, but I have the What Was I Made For 45 Biily Eilish. It says Barbie on the back.
I'm sorry.
But so me and my wife, we were watching the Grammys this year, and you know, Biily Eilish sings the song on stage, and she goes on to win Song of the Year. I think it was Record of the Year. There's so many categories that intertwine, but it was like the best song. It won trophy. And so I go after the Grammys are over, and I'm talking to my wife, and she knows that I like watching Biily Eilish and her brother Phineas, who's her producer. I don't want to downplay his contribution because it's tremendous. You know, she knows I like watching them in the studio. There's plenty of clips on YouTube. David Letterman did he has a Netflix show called My Next Guest Is, and Biily Eilish did one, and there's plenty of footage where Letterman is in the studio and Phineas and Biily Eilish are talking about the process. And I like watching that. So the Grammys end, I immediately go to YouTube and start showing my wife clips. You know, probably she's just like, oh dear God, here we go. You know, but I'm showing her clips, and I just love the way they work. They're very serious. They have fun, but like they really dig in and want to make the best music possible. I know she's a pop star, but they do this stuff in a bedroom. You know, I think now they have like a more legit studio that is still in a house, from what I understand. Okay. But you know, like, for the most part, it's just the two of them in a studio crafting these mega hits, basically, right? So we're watching them talking about the studio, talking about What Was I Made For. She had a very specific way that she sang the track. And there's clips of her talking about it where she was like, I had to sing it like really breathy, almost in a whisper. She was like, I could sing it like this. And she like really like, you know, really belts it out. But that's not the vibe. And she was like, it had to be this certain way. And as we're like watching that, like I'm listening and I'm going, I'm starting to hear how I could do this song, you know, like I'm hearing how I want to do this, you know. And I heard what instruments needed to take place for her voice and stuff. Like, it's an instrumental, in case anyone's wondering. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to record this. And so over 2 days here at the studio, I just, from the very first, you know, laying down the first piece onto tape to the final mix over a 2-day period, and just like, and I loved it, you know. And it's so sweet. Like you said, it sounds like a memory. It has like a lo-fi feel to it, you know. I'm super happy with how it came out, you know. I think I've probably spent too much time downplaying things and going like, oh, I hope other people like it. Like, now I'm at the point where like I'm really proud of like the stuff that I've been doing and really happy with it, you know. I don't think I need this. you know.
You really should be, man. You know, when I heard it, I was like, whoa, like that was
I kind of
and
kept
that
it
was,
from you.
well, listen, hey, all I can say is when I did hear it, I was grateful because I'm a huge fan of your work. I think you're a fantastic person. And for you to be able to take this idea, this vision that you have, and put it out and have it again stand apart from Chris and Andre, M-Tet, Life of Grime. I mean, this is a thing. There's a
Oh,
heartbeat to it.
oh
And
yeah.
so what I want to know is we got the digital release today. It's available. I want everybody to go and listen to this. All you got to do is search by Chris Lujan in your favorite streaming service. Do you envision a B-side, a physical release? I mean, is this something that you want to keep growing?
I don't know. I hadn't thought about a B-side at all. I do like the sound. I do like, you know, how it turned out, and I could see doing more instrumentals in that vein. But yeah, I don't know. I would definitely be interested in doing more stuff like that little like lo-fi
Mm,
feel. You know, I guess that's another road I could go down. You
yeah,
know,
man.
I'm not mad at it.
Yeah. Um, okay, so we talked about that. Now we're coming being close to out of questions here. I got one more in the tank, but I just want to give New Tone Recordings a shout out. You know, emerging cinematic soul, funk, and Latin music. I think they're a fantastic label. I'm so glad that you were able to connect and for things to work out because I think you deserve the best, and to have your music be on that platform is a beautiful thing to see for longtime fans. And I'm just so excited for what's next because I think it's an awesome fit for you. And folks, when we talk about New Tone Recordings, we're not just talking about the Charities record. You know, we're talking about records like this. These are records you've seen me champion. We're talking about the Boogaloo Assassins. Okay, we're talking about the Jazztronaut. So, you know, while you're shopping that new 45 from Chris Lujan, get familiar with the label, get familiar with the site, the other music that's on there, and it's available. They're fantastic records, and I'm glad for my connection to New Tone Recordings. I want to recap real quick the dates on this. So the pre-order for Life of Grime is up now. We showed you the color variants. I'm sure people want to be able to hear the music coming out their own speakers. So um, Yo is April 30th, digital release, Black Coffee May 14th, and the official date, okay, the 17th. That's when the physical copy is officially out there. Now, rumor has it that if you pre-order it now, it could be shipped as soon as next week. So I would act fast. I imagine it's a limited press. I imagine if you want to get the best color variant, especially that black coffee color variant, you'll hit the pre-order button now. Chris, I asked all my guests this, and I love asking you this question because I've probably asked you 3 or 4 times because you've been on here a bunch. But when you think of Life of Grime, when you think of, you know, the new music under Chris Lujan, share a quote, a mantra that has been top of mind as you've been creating this new lane for yourself, creating under the moniker Life of Grime. What's something that stands out to you?
Well, you know, in the past, I think the first time you asked that, I said, it's not what you look like when you're doing what you're doing. It's what you're doing when you're doing what you look like you're doing, which
Ooh,
was a line from Express Yourself, Charles Wright. I
okay.
believe the last time you asked me, I said, get up, stand up for your rights, get up, stand up, don't give up the fight, right? You put that question to me right now, and you know, since we're talking about Life of Grime, and I know what I'm doing is instrumental and not vocal.
Yeah.
So if you take word and change it to music, it would be posthumous. Every word I say should be a hip hop quotable.
I
Is that
love that. I love it.
okay?
I love that. Man, I love that. That's one of my favorite lines.
Oh yeah, for
I
sure.
mean, it's like a woke moment. Like I remember when I heard that for the first time.
Yeah, me
You
too.
know, it was really powerful. It's really interesting, man. Just kind of hearing this side of you because as my ears have evolved with Rare Soul and collecting these records, trying to find the sound. I've said to myself many times at night, thinking back to 2021, 2022, it's like, man, I thought my ears were tuned to the sound I like, but they weren't necessarily. It's something that continues to evolve. And I find myself more than ever kind of going back to what I call that sample sound. So when I listen to hip hop, I was never crazy about the lyrics, right? I grew up in upstate New York, in the town of Niskayuna. You know, I just, I was like one of the only kids walking around school rapping that stuff. And I find myself going back to those original tracks that the hip hop cats were sampling.
Right.
That was what I loved. I've always loved sounds. You've heard me talk about sounds, and it's a feeling that you get from it. And so it's really cool, man, to have this conversation with you. To me, this is like a milestone moment for you as an artist, for us as fans, to be able to see you continue to climb, continue to evolve, and give us like this kaleidoscope of all these different sounds that intertwine into different elements of music that span back to the 60s. And here you are leading the charge with this cinematic boom bap type of sound. I just want to say congratulations, man. As a friend, I'm proud of you, and I really can't wait to hear what's next. But
Thank you, and thank you for all you do for the scene.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. I love what I do. Any last minute words for the fans?
Buy this record and share it with your hip hop friends. For sure. We need to get it into the hands of the hip hop heads. Like I said, this is like a new market that we're trying to reach here. And it's not like we're going to go like make money from the hip hop guys. It's like, no, this is like, they're the ones who should hear this stuff. I'm making it for them, So yeah, if you're a soul fan, there's plenty of soul in these records.
Yeah.
If you're a funk fan, there's plenty of funk in these records.
Yeah.
If you like cinematic stuff, there's plenty of cinematic stuff in this. But it is made for the hip hop heads, and we need to get it to them. So buy the record and share it wide. That's all I got to say.
I got to co-sign on that because I'm a fan of instrumental music, specifically funk. I love the soul stuff, but I hear more of the funk. And I'm always thinking, what makes this one sound different from this one? And I think you nailed it with that hip hop sound. That is something that you don't necessarily get across a lot of the instrumental records
Right.
in the indie scene that have truly come out over, the last 24 months. I often say, it's very much treading on, a Menahan sound or this or that. Right. But Life of Grime really stands on its own, and you get that hip hop, right? You feel that with the drums.
Yeah, it's definitely not your typical soul record. I think the soul fans will like it, but like everything I'm doing with it is definitely like, I'm always in my brain like, this has to be hip hop. This has to be hip hop. Not just like, let's write another funky instrumental. Maybe the hip hop guys will like it. I'm like, no, I'm trying to do like straight up instrumental hip hop, And like, there's a lot of the other bands that we all love.
Yes.
That are funky and soulful, but I think this stands apart because there is that like definite angle towards the hip hop side of things,
Yeah, I mean, it takes me back to the roots. It's something that you can play, and it's not more of the same. And the other element to all this, really, I'm kind of forgetting what I'm saying, but shit, I don't know. I might have to take this offline. I totally had like a brain fart to it. I really want to get it because it was important to me. I know exactly what it was. One of the things that you and I have had conversations about many times is nobody creates and puts out music at the clip you do. And so we would always say, man, I say, Chris, slow down, baby. Give it some space. Let everybody catch their breath. But this is that album. This is that record. This is that 45. This is that new sound that is different. And you nailed it with this one, man. So congratulations. I can't wait to put the physical on the table back there. You know we're gonna have to do some sort of Chris Lujan tribute mix at
I'm
some point.
so happy with it. So happy with it.
All right, man. Thank you for joining me. We crossed the 7 o'clock hour, the God hour, as the RZA would say. So thank you for being here, man.
Absolutely.
I want to thank
Thank
everybody
you.
who tuned in tonight. And for those that are going to stream this back later, this was a fantastic talk with Chris Lujan. I recommend that y'all go back and look at some of our existing interviews, because you're truly going to be able to hear and see the evolution of this super talented brother. Like I said, I can't wait to hear what's next, but I'll take my time with this one. And don't forget, New Tone's the label, baby. Waxvillain, Seattle, Washington. We're out of here.